People say betrayal feels like a knife in the back. They never mention what it feels like when you're the one holding the knife. I used to think of myself as the quiet friend, the good guy who stayed out of trouble, the one who always helped others clean up their messes. Then one night, I became the mess. I remember the sound of rain that evening more than anything else. It wasn't a storm, just a slow, steady drizzle tapping the hotel window like it was keeping time for my heartbeat. The clock on the nightstand read 3:17 a.m., but time had stopped for me hours before that. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, half-dressed, half-destroyed. Her perfume still hung in the air, soft, floral, and cruelly familiar. She was asleep then, or pretending to be. I didn't dare look at her. I just kept my eyes on my hands, the same hands that had built furniture for my best friend's new apartment, the same hands that now felt like they'd committed a crime. Ethan had been my best friend since middle school. We'd done everything together, sports, jobs, heartbreaks. I knew his voice better than my own. And tomorrow, in less than 12 hours, he was supposed to marry her, Claire. When they met, I was the first person he told. "She's different," he'd said, grinning like a kid. I believed him. Claire was warm, funny, the kind of woman who remembered small things. She made you feel seen. Maybe that was my first mistake, letting her see too much of me. The night before the wedding, I'd been helping with last-minute errands. Ethan was out with his brothers, drinking, celebrating. Claire called and said she'd forgotten something, her grandmother's locket left in the bridal suite. She sounded anxious. I offered to drop it off. I shouldn't have. When I knocked on the hotel door, she opened it wearing one of Ethan's shirts. It hung loose on her shoulders, sleeves rolled, casual, intimate. She laughed when she saw the locket. "You're saving my life," she said. "Come in for a minute. I can't sleep anyway." I told myself it was fine. I told myself she just needed company. She poured wine, we talked about the stress of the wedding, about how surreal it all felt. The conversation turned softer, more personal. She said, "Do you ever feel like you're standing at the edge of something you can't see the bottom of?" I didn't answer. I think she already knew. It's strange how guilt doesn't arrive in one piece. It drips in slowly. A glance too long, a silence too heavy. By the time the rain started, the room already felt like a confession waiting to happen. I don't remember who moved first. Maybe we both did. What I remember is the silence afterward, the kind that hums in your bones. No words, just the echo of something we couldn't undo. When the morning light crept through the curtains, everything looked ordinary again. Claire sat at the vanity, brushing her hair, eyes red. I wanted to speak, to apologize, to rewind the night. Instead, I reached for my shirt. She said quietly, "You should go." Outside, the hallway smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. I walked out into it like a ghost. My phone buzzed. "Ethan. Where are you, man? We need you down here. Big day." I looked at the screen until his name blurred. Then I put the phone in my pocket and kept walking. I spent the ceremony standing behind him, straightening his tie, forcing my hands not to shake. Claire walked down the aisle looking perfect, radiant, unreadable. When she passed me, her eyes flickered. 1 second, maybe less. But I saw it. Guilt, fear, and something else. Recognition. The vows were a blur. I kept waiting for lightning to strike, for someone to stand up and shout. But the world stayed still. They kissed, the crowd cheered, and I smiled like a man at his own funeral. That night, I couldn't go to the reception. I told them I was sick. Maybe I was. I wandered the empty streets until dawn, thinking about how easily a single night can rewrite a lifetime of friendship. People think betrayal is loud. Shouting, slammed doors, confessions. But the real kind is quiet. It lives in small moments, in the space between glances, in the way you avoid mirrors because they know too much. I never told anyone. Not Ethan, not Claire. We carried the secret like co-conspirators in a crime we couldn't name. Every time I saw them together, I felt the knife twist a little deeper. Years later, I still remember that rain. The way it sounded against the window, steady and relentless. Like judgment. Like forgiveness that never came. Sometimes, late at night, I think about calling him. I imagine telling him everything, hearing the silence on the other end, and finally setting us both free. But I never do. Because some truths don't fix what they break, they only remind you how sharp the blade still is. And that's what betrayal really feels like. Not a knife in the back, but one you can't stop holding. When people ask how long I'd known Ethan, I always say forever. It isn't far from the truth. We met at 13, two kids who shared a love for late-night video games and getting into the kind of trouble that didn't make headlines. By the time we hit college, he was the brother I never had. If he called, I answered. If he needed help, I showed up. That was our unspoken rule. Then came Claire. The first time I saw her was at a campus coffee shop. Ethan had been talking about a girl from his economics class for weeks, and when he waved me over to meet her, I remember thinking he wasn't exaggerating. She had that bright, easy confidence that made you forget what you were about to say. She smiled when Ethan introduced me and said, "You're the famous best friend." I laughed, pretending I didn't already like the sound of her voice. Back then, she was just his girlfriend, the one who tagged along to parties, who laughed at our inside jokes even when she didn't understand them. She fit so naturally into our rhythm that I never imagined a world where she'd become part of my story in any other way. Years passed. They graduated before me. I stayed behind to finish my degree while they moved into an apartment downtown. Every few weekends, I'd visit. We'd cook, talk, and reminisce. It felt safe. It felt like family. But families change. The first crack appeared this summer. I lost my job. Ethan was traveling for work, and Claire invited me over for dinner. "You need a break," she said. I almost didn't go, but loneliness can make bad decisions sound reasonable. That night, she told me about her doubts, about how distant Ethan had become, how everything between them felt rehearsed. I listened, offered harmless advice, tried to be the friend I'd always been, but there was something new in the air, a quiet awareness. When she looked at me, it lingered half a second too long. It should have ended there. It didn't. We started texting occasionally. Nothing heavy at first. A meme, a photo, a complaint about work. Then messages stretched longer, hours apart, but always answered. When Ethan was away, she'd check if I was eating, if I'd found another job. "You're too hard on yourself," she said once. "You have a good heart." It's strange how kindness can turn dangerous when you're starving for it. I remember one afternoon we met for coffee. She looked tired, makeup barely hiding the circles under her eyes. She talked about how Ethan's career was taking off and how she felt like she was fading beside him. I told her she was wrong, that she lit up every room she walked into. The moment the words left my mouth, I felt the air change. She looked at me like she'd just heard something she wasn't supposed to. Then she smiled, soft and confused, and thanked me. After that, I started noticing small things. The way she'd send a quick good luck before my interviews, or how she'd remember details from conversations months old. Little acts of care that didn't belong to friendship anymore. Guilt came first. Then curiosity. Then the terrifying realization that I wanted to be around her even when Ethan wasn't there. When Ethan told me he was proposing, I congratulated him like any best man would. He was beaming, full of plans, and I was right there helping him choose the ring. That night, I drove home sick with a happiness that wasn't mine. They got engaged in winter. Snow was falling the night she called to tell me. "He did it," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "I'm engaged." I forced my own voice steady. "You deserve it." But after we hung up, I sat in the dark, wondering why it felt like I'd lost something I never had. The months leading to their wedding were a blur of fittings, planning, endless to-do lists. Claire and I kept our distance. At least, we tried. Every time we met, to pick up decorations, to help Ethan with logistics. There was an invisible current between us, unspoken but undeniable. We never said anything, never crossed that line, yet every glance felt like a step closer to it. One evening, a week before the wedding, she dropped off some invitations at my apartment because Ethan was out of town again. We talked at the door, just 5 minutes, but something inside me cracked. She said, "I hope he never forgets how lucky he is." I replied, "Neither of you should." We stood there, silent, until she left. The echo of that silence stayed long after she was gone. By the time the wedding week arrived, I was a shadow of myself. I told Ethan I was exhausted from work, but really, I was exhausted from pretending. Pretending that I wasn't waiting for this to end, that I didn't want the wrong person, that I hadn't already betrayed him in my heart. Looking back, the path to that night feels inevitable. Like dominoes lined up years ago, just waiting for one careless breath. If someone had stopped me then, told me where it was leading, maybe I would have listened. Maybe I would have found a way out before it was too late. But that's the lie we tell ourselves to sleep at night, that there's still time to turn back before the fall. In truth, once you've started down that slope, gravity does the rest. And by the time the rain began to fall on the eve of their wedding, I was already halfway down, reaching for something that would only break me further. The hotel was glowing with that peculiar light that only exists the night before a wedding. Soft, golden, anxious. I arrived late, carrying a box of last-minute decorations Ethan had forgotten at the venue. He'd already left for the rehearsal dinner with his brothers. Claire was in the lobby, pacing, phone pressed to her ear. When she saw me, she mouthed, "Thank God," and hung up. You're a lifesaver, she said, reaching for the box. I told her Ethan would owe me for this one. We both smiled, but it was the kind of smile that hides exhaustion. She led me up to the suite. The hallway smelled of lilies from the arrangement stacked against the wall. Inside, there were open suitcases, half-folded ribbons, and a wedding dress hanging like a ghost by the window. Can you believe it's really happening? She asked. She tried to sound excited, but her voice cracked. I said, you should be sleeping. She laughed once, sharp and tired. Sleep. Right. I set the box on the table and looked around. Everything was perfect. The colors, the music playlist humming softly from her phone, the tiny details she'd obsessed over for months. Everything except her face. She looked pale, restless. Wine? She asked. She didn't wait for an answer. 2 glasses, half full. She handed me one and sat on the edge of the couch, curling her feet underneath her. Ethan's out with the guys? I asked. She nodded. He called to check on me. He sounded happy. I didn't tell him I was crying 10 minutes before. I sat across from her. Cold feet? Something like that. She took a sip. It's not him. He's good. He's steady. I just keep wondering if he deserves better. Everyone thinks that before a wedding, I said. You'll be fine. She looked at me for a long time, as if she was trying to decide whether to believe me. You really think so? She asked. I nodded. Ethan's lucky. Her eyes didn't move. Sometimes I think you say what he's supposed to say. That caught me off guard. I looked away, pretending to study the rain beginning to streak the window. Outside, the city lights blurred into watery halos. Claire whispered, You ever feel like you're about to do something you can't undo? Yes, I said, before I could stop myself. Silence filled the room like fog. The music ended. The hum of the air conditioner became unbearably loud. She stood, walked to the window, and touched the glass. I keep thinking about tomorrow. The photos, the speeches, the dancing. Everyone smiling like they know what love looks like. And I'll be standing there, hoping no one notices I'm terrified. I joined her at the window, keeping a careful distance. You're just nervous. Big changes do that. She nodded slowly. You always know what to say. That's what makes this harder. Her voice trembled, but she didn't cry. I wanted to tell her to stop talking, to send me away, to call Ethan and let him fix whatever was breaking inside her. Instead, I said, maybe you just need to breathe. We stood there, both of us staring at our reflections in the dark glass. The rain traced crooked lines between us. For a moment, it looked like we were standing on opposite sides of a cracked mirror. Ethan trusts you more than anyone, she said softly. He says you're the reason he's kept his head through all this, that you always know what's right. I forced a small smile. He overestimates me. No, she said, he doesn't. She turned to me then, close enough that I could see the faint smudge of mascara under her eyes. You ever think about what would happen if we met first? I froze. My mind ran through every memory, every line we'd crossed without admitting it. Don't, I whispered. Her breath shook. I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm doing. Neither did I. She stepped back, sat down again, covered her face with her hands. Forget I said anything, she murmured. I just needed to talk. I sat beside her, careful, like approaching a wounded animal. You're allowed to be scared, I said. You're allowed to feel whatever you feel. It doesn't mean you don't love him. She lowered her hands and looked at me. And what about you? What do you feel? I should have lied. I should have said I was tired, that I just wanted the wedding to go smoothly. But the truth was heavier than that. I don't know, I said, and that's the problem. The clock ticked somewhere behind us. 5 minutes, maybe 10, passed in silence. The air was thick with everything unsaid. I could feel her breathing beside me, steady but trembling underneath. She whispered, This feels wrong. I said, It does. She looked at me. Then why can't I move? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The rain grew louder, drumming against the glass like distant applause. I stood, grabbed my coat, and said the only thing that made sense. You should get some sleep. She nodded but didn't get up. Will you stay until I do? She asked quietly. For a long time, I didn't move. Then I sat back down, a safe distance away. She rested her head against the back of the couch, eyes closed, exhaustion finally overtaking her. I sat there in the dim light, watching the rain. My thoughts spun circles until dawn bled through the curtains. When she finally stirred, she looked at me and said, You didn't have to stay. I know, I said. She gave a small, tired smile. Thank you. I left before Ethan called. The hallway smelled like lilies again, sweet and suffocating. I remember thinking that scent would follow me for years. Later, at the wedding, when she walked down the aisle, her eyes met mine for half a heartbeat. We both knew what almost happened. We both knew that in some silent, dangerous way it already had. I didn't sleep that night. Even after I left her suite, even after I walked the 2 blocks back to my hotel, I couldn't stop hearing her voice. It followed me through the empty streets and into my room. Every word echoed against the walls. You ever feel like you're about to do something you can't undo? By the time the first light broke through the curtains, I was still fully dressed, sitting in the chair by the window. The city was gray, washed clean by the rain that hadn't stopped all night. Down below, early traffic hummed, people moving on with their ordinary lives while mine quietly came apart. My phone buzzed. "Ethan, big day, man," his text read. "Breakfast at 9. Don't be late." He added a smiling emoji. Like this was any other morning. Like I hadn't spent the entire night watching my reflection fracture in a hotel window. I forced myself to shower, to shave, to look human. The mirror didn't cooperate. There's something about guilt that changes your reflection. It makes you look both older and smaller. I stared at myself for a long time before whispering, "Get it together." Downstairs, the hotel restaurant was crowded with wedding guests. Laughter, clinking glasses, the smell of coffee and pastries. Ethan spotted me instantly. He waved me over with that same grin he'd had since we were kids. "Brother," he said, slapping my back. "Couldn't have done this without you." I smiled. It was a weak thing, but it fooled him. That was the curse of our friendship. He believed every version of me, even the ones that weren't real. Claire wasn't there yet. Her absence was loud. "She's with her bridesmaids," Ethan said, reading my glance. "Nerves, probably." I nodded. "She'll be fine." He leaned back in his chair, coffee in hand, oblivious to the storm sitting across from him. "You've got to admit, I lucked out. I mean, she's the real thing. Kind, loyal, beautiful. I don't know what I did to deserve her." For a second, my throat closed. I could barely breathe. He looked at me like he always did, with trust, pure, unfiltered trust. I forced myself to match his smile. "You do," I said. "You always did." He laughed, clinking his mug against mine. "To the best day of my life." I drank because it was easier than speaking. Hours blurred into ceremony prep. The suits, the flowers, the photos. I stood beside him as his best man, adjusting his tie, straightening his cufflinks, trying not to look at my hands. Those same hands had tied countless fishing knots for him, fixed his car, helped him move apartments. Now they trembled. At noon, the cars pulled up to take us to the venue. Ethan bounced with nervous energy, checking his phone every 2 minutes. I stared out the window of the limo, silent. The wedding was set in an old chapel just outside the city. When we arrived, guests were already seated. The music was soft, sentimental. Ethan was pacing near the altar, rehearsing his vows. "Do I sound stupid?" he asked. "No," I said. "You sound like a man in love." He exhaled. "Good, because I am." The doors opened, and everyone stood. When Claire walked in, everything stopped. She looked radiant, hair swept up, eyes calm, steps measured, no trace of last night's uncertainty. The dress shimmered as she moved down the aisle, holding her father's arm. For a heartbeat, her gaze flicked toward me. A glance, barely a second, but it landed like a confession. Neither of us spoke. Then she looked away. Ethan didn't notice. His face was all devotion. As they exchanged vows, I watched his hands tremble the way mine had hours before. I listened to her voice, steady and clear, promising love, honesty, and faithfulness. Words that felt heavier than they should. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," the applause sounded distant, like it was happening in another life. Afterward, during photos, she thanked me for fixing her veil. Her fingers brushed mine for a split second, deliberate or accidental. I couldn't tell, but it was enough to start the spiral again. At the reception, the hall glittered with lights and laughter. I stayed near the bar, nursing the same drink for hours, pretending to mingle. People kept saying how happy the couple looked, how perfect they were together. I smiled and nodded. I knew the truth. Perfection was a mask, and I'd helped paint it. Later that evening, Ethan grabbed the microphone for his speech. "There's one person I need to thank more than anyone else," he said, pointing at me. "This guy has been my brother since day one. He's the reason I kept my head straight through everything. I love you, man." The crowd cheered. I raised my glass. Claire was watching me from across the room. Her expression was unreadable. Gratitude, maybe, or guilt. Maybe both. I left before dessert, told them I wasn't feeling well. Outside, the air was cold, the sky streaked with thin clouds. The world was quiet again. Too quiet. I walked for hours, through empty streets, past shuttered shops and streetlights flickering against puddles. Every step felt heavier than the last. By the time I reached my apartment, the city was asleep. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, and let the truth settle like dust. They were married now, and I was the best man, in title only. In every other way, I'd failed. The next morning, I got a text from Ethan. "We're heading out for the honeymoon. You sure you're okay?" I stared at it for a long time before replying, "Yeah, don't worry about me." Then, I deleted the thread. For weeks afterward, I tried to convince myself it was just a moment. One fragile, broken moment that didn't mean anything. But guilt has a long memory. It hides in silence, waiting for you to stop pretending you're fine. Whenever I closed my eyes, I saw her standing at the window that night, rain reflecting in her eyes, whispering words we both wish we could take back. And I realized something. Betrayal doesn't end when you walk away. It follows you home, sits beside your bed, and waits for you to wake up. Time passed, but nothing changed. If anything, the silence made it worse. Guilt doesn't fade on its own. It settles. It roots. It learns the shape of your thoughts, the sound of your heartbeat. Weeks went by where I woke up thinking I'd finally found distance from that night, only to feel it return by midday like a shadow stepping back into place. I saw Ethan and Claire only a few times after the wedding. They came back from their honeymoon sunburned and smiling, telling stories about beaches and street markets, and laughing about losing their luggage in Rome. They looked like happiness itself, like a painting of what love is supposed to be. I smiled back. I congratulated them again. I laughed when I was supposed to. But something in me recoiled every time their hands touched. The worst part was that they were trying to include me, trying to make me feel welcomed. Ethan kept saying, "We're family, don't disappear on us now." And I couldn't explain that disappearing felt like the only decent thing left for me to do. I avoided them. I let texts go unanswered. I claimed work, exhaustion, errands, anything. But guilt is a patient hunter. It never stops following. Then came the night it all caught up to me. It was late. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, that familiar emptiness pooling inside my chest. The kind that comes when you've run out of excuses. I reached for my phone without thinking. Not for Ethan. For her. I didn't even type a greeting. Just, "We need to talk." There was no typing indicator. No reply. I waited. Stared at the screen until my eyes hurt. Then, where? We agreed on a park halfway between our apartments. Neutral ground. A place that shouldn't hold memory. When I got there, she was already sitting on a bench near the fountain. Coat pulled tight around her. Hair down, no makeup. She looked younger like that. Or maybe just tired. I sat beside her, leaving space between us. The air was cold. The water in the fountain made a quiet, steady rhythm. She didn't speak. Neither did I. Silence between us felt heavier than words. Finally, she said, "I knew this would come eventually." "I tried to move on," I said. "I really did." "I know." There was a tremor in her voice, barely noticeable unless you knew her. And I did. That was the problem. I knew her too well. "I can't do this," I said. "I can't pretend nothing happened." She nodded slowly. "I've been pretending every day since the wedding. I thought it would fade. It didn't." Her hands were clasped in her lap, fingers tightening and loosening. I could tell she was holding something back. "I didn't come here to fix anything," I said. "I came because I need to tell the truth. To him." Her head snapped toward me. "No. I have to." "Don't," she said, voice trembling now. "You'll destroy him." I stared ahead at the fountain. The water kept falling, calm and unchanging. "I already did," I said. She shook her head. "He doesn't know. He still trusts us. He still loves you. That matters." "Does it?" I asked. "Yes." Her voice broke. "Because if he loses that, if he loses you and me at the same time, he won't come back from it." I didn't want to believe her. I wanted to be righteous. I wanted to claim honesty was the right thing. But the truth was, I didn't know if honesty here would be for him or for me. Maybe confession wasn't a gift. Maybe it was just another form of selfishness. She took a breath. "I've been trying to love him the way he deserves, and I do love him. But I also know that something broke that night. In me, in you, in everything." I felt something inside me twist. Not because she was wrong, but because she was right. "And what do we do with that?" I asked. She looked at me then. Really looked. Eyes raw and unguarded. Not afraid, but accepting. "We live with it," she said. 3 words. Simple. Crushing. "We carry it," she continued. "We don't confess to feel better. We don't destroy him to punish ourselves. We let the consequence be that we never forget. I closed my eyes. Her meaning was clear. The punishment was continuing to live with what we'd done, not freeing ourselves from it. I wanted to argue. I wanted to call it cowardice. But the truth was cruel and precise. Confession wouldn't heal him. It would only transfer our pain to him. And that was the final betrayal. She whispered, "Let him keep the version of us that loved him." For the first time since the wedding, I felt myself breathe. Not relief, but something like acceptance. A sharp, bitter acceptance. We sat there until the cold became real again. Until the world started moving around us. Until we could pretend to be normal again. When we finally stood, she said, "We can't see each other for a while." I nodded. I know. We didn't hug. We didn't touch. We didn't say goodbye. We just walked away in opposite directions. The sky was lighter by the time I got home. The city was waking up. People stepping out the door, coffee brewing, alarms buzzing, life moving. But I stopped in the doorway before going inside. Because I realized something. Carrying the truth isn't noble. It's heavy. It's permanent. It changes the shape of you. And the cost of what we did wasn't only the guilt. The real cost was knowing we would never again be the people we were before that night. It's been 3 years. They live in the suburbs now. Ethan and Claire. Quiet street. Dog. Matching garden chairs. The kind of life people post about when they want the world to think everything is perfect. I see them sometimes. Not in person. Online. A tagged photo here, a birthday post there. She never looks directly at the camera. He always does. It's strange how the smallest things become symbols after the damage is done, like where their hands fall in a photo. Or how wide the smile is. Or whether they still look like themselves. I haven't spoken to either of them in over a year. Not since the dinner. It was a cold night, January, I think. Ethan called out of the blue, said he missed me, that we needed to catch up. Part of me wanted to say no. The other part was tired of hiding. We met at a bar near where we used to live. He looked older, a little heavier, a little less sure of himself. Time does that, even to the people who seem unshakable. We talked like nothing had ever gone wrong. Work, sports, politics. I laughed in the right places. He told me Claire was doing well. I asked about the house. We were actors reading lines from a script we didn't believe in anymore. At some point, the conversation turned quiet, the way it always does when people stop pretending. He looked at me for a long time. "You ever think about that week?" he asked. My stomach dropped. "What about it?" He shrugged. "You just seemed off." I kept my eyes on my drink. A lot was happening. "Yeah," he said. "A lot was." He didn't ask me anything directly. He didn't have to. He was watching me the way only someone who truly knows you can, like he was studying a book he'd already read but missed something in the margins. Then he said it. Calm, casual, lethal. "Claire had a dream once. Said she woke up crying. That you and her, that something happened." I didn't move. He stirred his drink. "She swore it was nothing, that it was just guilt from stress. But I don't know. There were moments, after, when something didn't feel right." I didn't lie, but I didn't speak either. He finished his drink, tapped the rim, and said, "Anyway, past is past." We paid the bill, walked out in silence. He hugged me before he left. I stood on the sidewalk long after he was gone, breathing in the winter air like it could freeze the memory out of me. That was the last time I saw him. I never told him the truth, not because I was afraid he'd hate me, but because I think a part of him already does. And the other part, I think he needs the lie more than the truth. And Claire? She sent me one message a few weeks after the wedding. Just one. "I hope you're okay." "I'm not, but I will be." I never replied. Maybe we both understood that silence was the only apology we could offer each other, and maybe the only one either of us deserved. There's a strange kind of punishment in being forgotten by someone who once trusted you with their entire world. It doesn't come all at once. It creeps in, slowly, replacing your reflection with someone you don't quite recognize. I dated after that, tried to move on. But every time I got close to someone, I pulled away. Not because I didn't want love, but because I didn't trust the part of myself that could betray it. Some nights, I still dream of that rain, of Claire at the window, of Ethan laughing in the hotel hallway, completely unaware. The sound of his voice haunts me more than the silence ever could. You want to know what betrayal feels like? It's not fire. It's not rage. It's the echo of a secret you never stop hearing, a whisper stitched into every quiet moment that follows. A voice that says, "You did this." And no one will ever truly know who you were before you did. But I remember, and that's enough. I've told you everything now. Not because I'm looking for forgiveness, but because secrets rot in the dark, and mine has been breathing for far too long. This was my confession. Take it however you want. Just don't forget what it cost.